In 1936, in 1935 in fact, fall of 35, there was a lecture given by a graduate student about the rocket work of a man in Germany by the name of Eugen Sanger. A couple of fellows not associated with Caltech went to that lecture. They had been shooting off in their backyard here in Pasadena some powder rockets, little tiny sky rockets, if you will. Solid fuel, zip, zip, up in the sky. And they were interested in broadening their understanding of both what they were doing and increasing their capabilities. They went to this lecture, listened to what happened. After the lecture, went up and talked to the fellow who gave it by the name, his name's Bolle. And he said, well, why don't you talk to my professor, Theodor von Karman. Von Karman was trained in Europe and had come to Caltech in the 1930s, and he headed a thing called the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory, a research institution within Caltech. The two guys from the town their names were Jack Parsons and Ed Foreman. Parsons could be characterized as a explosives chemist, self-taught, experience only, worked with skyrockets and worked with a guy that did fireworks over in Glendale, knew that. Ed Foreman was a good mechanic, knew how to use a good metal lathe, make fine pieces of equipment. And he and Parsons had got together, known each other since the 8th grade, been friends, and had worked together on different things. The two of them went to see von Karman, and von Karman's nice guy that he was, being as important as he was, encouraged them and said, well, since you're from the town, I can't really do much for you, but there's another young man, a graduate student here, who you might want to meet and get to know, because he's looking at the same kinds of things you are and interested in these newfangled ideas, rockets, by the name of Frank Molina. Well, in the fall of 1936 and then into January of 37, in the Arroyo Seco, up above the Rose Bowl, in the riverbed, no one lived here, no housing, no buildings, just open, flat, empty land, a good safe place to build a motor that might blow up. They tested this little motor. Out of all of this came a test that they looked at and said, hey, can we do more than this? It wasn't much to begin with, but it's considered the beginning of JPL. JPL, as it is known, is about 50 years old. It was founded in the 1940s as a wartime research laboratory doing rocket research, propulsion research, and mainly receiving its money from Army Ordnance. Von Karman was a member of a committee in 1940, that National Science Foundation, that was looking at anticipating, I suppose, various wartime needs. They knew the war would come eventually to the United States, so what can we do to prepare for it? Jet-assisted takeoffs. That is, trying to develop some way to make it so airplanes using a solid fuel rocket, or maybe a liquid fuel rocket, who knows, we'll have to find out, to be able to use a runway that was much, much shorter, or possibly take off from the deck of an aircraft carrier. Von Karman came home with $10,000 and said, what we're going to do is find a small airplane. In fact, it turned out to be an airplane called the Air Coupe, which was so small, it was hard to stall. It was a one-man open cockpit type of aircraft, but it was a modern airframe, but it weighed under 1,000 pounds, even when the pilot was inside it. And he said, okay, we'll try to build some sort of a motor that we can use with that aircraft that will get it off the ground in a shorter distance. In August of 1941, the war still hasn't started, von Karman, Parsons, Foreman, Molina, and a whole bunch of other people who are now kind of coming together. Another roommate of Molina's here at Caltech, a fellow by the name of Martin Summerfield, gets involved. A very brilliant Chinese graduate student, a fellow by the name of Huishu Tian, gets involved. And with Parsons, and Parsons gets some other people working with him who know other aspects of solid motors. The Miller brothers, Fred and Clyde Miller, come to work with him. And they get together and, using Lee Page's glue, pack into a heavy metal cylinder, ammonium perchlorate. But they had a problem. The problem was that if the temperature got too extreme where these were stored, the material separated from the walls, and instead of being cigarette burning, the burning went down the sides, the pressure built up, and the thing exploded. Well, this isn't very safe. Jack solved the problem. And as the story has it, he and Clyde Miller, or Fred Miller, one of the Miller brothers, are out walking one day, and they come across a place here in Pasadena where the roof is being repaired. And there is a tar truck, asphalt's being used, put up on the roof. And Parsons has this great insight into solving the problem that he's faced with. This occurs sometime maybe in June of 1942. No first-hand accounts. Parsons never told the story himself. It's all apocryphal. But apparently this is about what happened. He says to himself, I could substitute asphalt and maybe some oil to mix it for the binder that would be needed for ammonium perchlorate. And instead of having to scram this down by hydraulic pressure into this metal tube, I could maybe pour it in because I could melt it. If I don't heat it too hot, it won't explode. I can have a controlled heating, maybe 160, 180 degrees. The asphalt will be liquid. I can mix the ammonium perchlorate in with it. I can pour it into that tube that I've got ready, and it will adhere to the walls and solve my problem. Ta-da, it did.